In 1998, a young comedian named Tomoaki Hamatsu stepped into what he thought was an audition for a quirky Japanese game show. He was 22, eager, and chasing a dream in the chaotic world of entertainment. What he didn't know was that he was about to become the centerpiece of a televised experiment so cruel, so invasive, that it would push the boundaries of human endurance and ethical decency. This is the story of Nasubi, a man stripped of everything, watched by millions, and left to survive in a nightmare disguised as entertainment. In this episode, we're unraveling the disturbing truth behind Susunu, Denpa Shōnen, and the man who emerged from its shadow. But before we dive in, some of the details in this story are disturbing and may not be suitable for all audiences, so viewer discretion is strongly advised. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's dive into Nasubi's story. To understand the weight of what happened to Tomoaki Hamatsu, we need to know who he was before the world branded him as Nasubi. Born on August 3, 1975 in Fukushima, Japan, Tomoaki was a young man with big dreams. He was a comedian, part of Japan's vibrant entertainment scene, known for its wild game shows and eccentric personalities. His nickname, Nasubi, meaning eggplant in Japanese, came from his long, expressive face, a feature that made him stand out in a crowd. By 1998, he was just another hopeful performing small gigs, trying to carve out a name in a cutthroat industry. But in January of that year, everything changed. Nasubi responded to a vague casting call for a show business-related job. It was pitched as a chance to break into the big leagues, Juno. No details, no fine print, just a promise of exposure. He was blindfolded, driven to an undisclosed location, and led into a small, empty apartment. The door locked behind him. What he thought was a simple audition was the beginning of a 15-month ordeal that would strip him of his dignity, his privacy, and nearly his sanity. This wasn't a game show, this was Susunu, Denpa Shōnen, a program known for its outrageous stunts, but about to take things to a level that still shocks the world today. Let's dive into what happened next. The rules were simple on paper but barbaric in practice. Nasubi was stripped naked and left in a barren apartment with nothing but a table, a phone, a pen, a stack of postcards, and a pile of magazines. His task? Enter mail-in sweepstakes to win everything he needed to survive: food, clothing, essentials, until he accumulated prizes worth 1 million yen, roughly 8,000 US dollars. He had no money, no food, no contact with the outside world. Just him, his wits, and a relentless ticking clock. But here's the part that turns your stomach. Nasubi didn't know he was being watched. Hidden cameras captured every moment of his existence, broadcasting live to over 15 million viewers across Japan. His naked body was censored with a cartoon eggplant, hence the nickname Nasubi, sticking like a cruel joke. He thought this was a private challenge, a recording for a future show. Instead, his every move, every moment of vulnerability, was entertainment for a nation. And the producers? They were counting on his suffering to drive ratings. Imagine it. You're alone, naked, starving, and every second of your struggle is a spectacle. Nasubi was given a few crackers by the producers to keep him alive in the early days, but that was it. Everything else depended on luck, on whether a magazine sweepstakes would come through with a prize. Days turned into weeks, and the reality of his situation set in. The first few weeks were brutal. Nasubi's first win was a jar of jelly, hardly enough to sustain a grown man. He'd spend hours filling out postcards, his only lifeline to survival. When food finally arrived, it was often inadequate or humiliating. A bag of rice, but no way to cook it. He ate it raw, chewing dry grains to stave off hunger. A can of dog food, which he consumed out of desperation, his face contorted in disgust as he forced it down. A single vacuum cleaner bag, useless without a vacuum. Women's underwear that didn't fit his body, leaving him exposed and humiliated. The psychological toll was unimaginable. Alone for weeks, Nasubi began talking to himself to cope. When he won a stuffed toy, he named it Sensei, treating it like a friend, a confidant, a lifeline to sanity. He'd hold conversations with it, his voice cracking with loneliness. He'd stare at the walls pacing the tiny room, his naked body shivering in the cold. The apartment had no heat, no bed, no comfort, just a concrete box where his every moment was a performance he didn't consent to. And the producers didn't stop there. They manipulated him, toyed with him. When he won a television, it was a cruel irony. He could watch the world he was cut off from, but he couldn't reach it. When he won a PlayStation with the game Denpa Shōnen, he played it obsessively, not knowing he was one of the world's first gaming live streamers. His every button pressed a spectacle. The audience laughed, but Nasubi was breaking. Days without food stretched his body to the limit. His ribs began to show. His face grew gaunt. He'd wrap himself in magazine pages to stay warm, the crinkle of paper his only shield against the cold. When he won a bicycle, he rode it in circles around the tiny room, a desperate attempt to feel something other than despair. He'd sing to himself, silly songs from his comedy days, but his voice grew weaker, his spirit fraying. And the worst part? The audience loved it. Ratings soared as people tuned in to watch a man suffer, unaware that he was unaware of their gaze. On X, people still talk about it, calling it reality horror, or a human experiment gone too far. One user wrote, "Nasubi's story feels like a dystopian novel, but it was real." Another said, "How was this legal?" Good question. Let's keep going. After 335 days, Nasubi hit his 1 million yen goal. A bag of rice pushed him over the edge, a bitter victory. He was blindfolded, told he'd won, and led out of the apartment. Freedom, right? Wrong. In a twist that feels straight out of a horror movie, the producers took him to South Korea, locked him in another apartment, and told him to start over. This time, he had to win enough for a plane ticket home. Naked, alone, again. Nasubi broke. He refused to continue, his voice hoarse with exhaustion, his body trembling. He begged to be let go, but the producers negotiated with him for hours, wearing him down until he agreed. Can you imagine that moment? You've just endured nearly a year of starvation, isolation, and humiliation, only to be told it's not over. On X, one user put it bluntly. This was torture, plain and simple. The producers were sadists. In South Korea, the cycle repeated. More sweepstakes, more hunger, more despair. He won a melon, but it was rotten by the time it arrived. He won a pair of shoes, but they were too small, cutting into his feet. His mental state deteriorated further. He began hallucinating, seeing faces in the walls, hearing voices that weren't there. The stuffed toy, Sensei, was his only anchor, but even that was fading. After months, he finally won enough for the ticket home, 15 months after the ordeal began. When Nasubi was finally released, he was a shell of himself. He stepped into the world to find he was a celebrity, a fact that horrified him. Strangers recognized him, laughed about the eggplant, quoted his desperate ramblings from the show. He hadn't known he was being watched, and now the world knew his most vulnerable moments. Adjusting was agonizing. Clothes felt foreign, itchy against his skin after so long without them. Crowds overwhelmed him. He suffered nightmares, flashbacks of the apartment, the sound of postcards tearing from magazines haunting his sleep. But the damage wasn't just personal. The show sparked outrage when the truth came out. Critics called it a violation of human rights, a psychological experiment without consent. The producer, Tsuchiya Toshio, defended it, saying Nasubi volunteered and that the show was meant to be inspirational. But Nasubi's own words, shared in the 2024 Hulu documentary The Contestant, tell a different story. It was the lowest point of my life. I felt like an animal in a cage. The documentary, directed by Claire Titley, lays bare the cruelty. Nasubi describes the betrayal, the hunger pangs that left him doubled over, the moments he considered breaking the window and jumping to escape. He talks about the dog food, the taste lingering for weeks, the shame of eating it while cameras rolled. He recalls the South Korea twist, how he sobbed for hours, begging for release, only to be coerced into continuing. Yet he also speaks of survival, of clinging to hope through sheer will.
しかし、
でもちょっと厳しいね。
Against all odds, Nasubi rebuilt his life. He returned to comedy, taking small roles in shows like Kamen Rider W, but his focus shifted. The 2011 Fukushima disaster, earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear meltdown hit his hometown hard. Nasubi became a social worker, pouring his energy into rebuilding his community. He climbed Mount Everest in 2016, raising awareness for Fukushima's recovery, saying, "I want the world to know we're still here, still fighting." His resilience is staggering. On X, fans call him a hero, a symbol of human strength. One post reads, "Nasubi turned trauma into purpose. That's real power." But the scars remain. In The Contestant, he admits he still struggles with trust, with crowds, with the sound of laughter that feels too much like the audiences back then. Nasubi's story forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. How far is too far for entertainment? Susunu. Denpa Shōnen wasn't just a show. It was a psychological gauntlet, a panopticon where a man's suffering was gamified. The lack of informed consent is chilling. Nasubi didn't know he was live, didn't know his pain was a product. The producers exploited his vulnerability, his hunger, his nakedness, all for ratings. And it wasn't just Nasubi. The show's other stunts included sending a comedian to hitchhike across Africa with no money and exposing contestants to extreme conditions for laughs. But Nasubi's segment was the breaking point. On X, one user wrote, "This was Black Mirror before Black Mirror existed." Another said, "Reality TV thrives on pain, but this was a crime." Japan's TV industry in the 90s was a wild west, with few regulations on ethical boundaries. Shows like Denpa Shōnen pushed limits to see how far audiences would go. And they went far. 15 million viewers tuned in to watch Nasubi suffer. But today, such a show would likely be shut down, its producers sued, or worse. The world has changed, but has it changed enough? Nasubi's ordeal wasn't just a dark chapter in TV history, it was a cultural turning point. It exposed the dangers of unchecked entertainment, the human cost of content. Nasubi himself became an accidental pioneer, his PlayStation sessions marking one of the first gaming live streams, a twisted irony given the rise of platforms like Twitch. But his legacy isn't about gaming, it's about survival. In The Contestant, Nasubi reflects, "I don't hate what happened, it made me who I am." That strength is why his story resonates. On X, people share his quotes, his Everest climb, his Fukushima work, calling him unbreakable. But let's not romanticize it. He was broken, repeatedly, by a system that saw him as a product. His triumph is his own, not the show's. Nasubi's story isn't just about one man's suffering. It's a mirror held up to our obsession with watching others struggle. Reality TV still thrives on manufactured drama, but Susunu, Denpa Shōnen, crossed a line that's hard to unsee. It forces us to ask, what are we complicit in when we watch? Are we entertained by pain or by resilience? Nasubi's resilience is the heart of this story. He endured starvation, isolation, and betrayal, yet emerged with a mission to help others. His work in Fukushima, his Everest climb, his quiet dignity. They're a rebuke to the producers, who tried to reduce him to a punchline. But the questions linger. How did this happen? Why did millions watch? And could it happen again? Thank you for joining us on this chilling exploration of Nasubi's story, if you have made it this far. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, then check out these videos on the screen now. If you have a topic suggestion, please send it to the email in the description. And as always, remember to like, comment, share the video, and subscribe to our channel. I will see you in the next one.